Hello and welcome back to the Will I Vike It podcast. Today, my guest is PukuB or Vanessa, depending on who she's talking to. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And I'll give you an opportunity to meet the Puku. This is Puku, my cat. So PukuB is named after her.
So I said Puku, so it's Puku.
Puku, yeah.
PukuB. Okay, I've been saying it wrong. Apologies.
That's okay. And actually, Puku means as Maori for tummy.
Okay.
That's all you needed to know about Puku as a kitten.
How long have you had Puku?
She is 18 and a half.
18 and a half. Wow.
Yeah. We just lost her sister Freya about a month ago.
Oh no.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
18 and a half, pretty good
Yeah.
for a small cat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. As you know, we
yes,
lost our dog recently as well, so I know the pain.
yeah, no, it was very hard, but Puku is taking up the reins. She's gone from being an elective mute
Yeah.
to a very demanding vocal cat. So I'm going to apologize to anyone that's watching rather than listening. There may be ears and a tail that turns up occasionally because I pay the bills and she owns the house.
That's the best way, isn't it? For
Yes,
her, I
you think so.
mean, yeah. So
And of
yeah, I
course,
guess. Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, of course, I've been away for a couple of days down at Butts, so she really wants the attention right now.
Yes, yes. So I will quickly say that we've seen each other a couple of times in the last few weeks in person, and we did attempt to record in person, but for some reason, technology failed us. So we're re-recording this evening because we recorded after our courses at the ATC about 2 weeks ago, I think.
I think it was 2 weeks ago.
And then we both at Beltane on Saturday. So I last saw you yesterday.
Yes.
Just to catch everybody up. So I guess a good place to start would be maybe to explain what it is that you do as PukuB.
Okay, so I've got kind of a three prongs to PukuB. The first one is going into schools and teaching history workshops. And I only teach history workshops based on the archaeological work that I've done.
Yeah.
And I've worked globally. Obviously, I don't sound like most English people coming from New Zealand. So I've worked in the Pacific, I worked in the Maya world, I've worked in the States, I've worked out in the Middle East, and I've worked here. So in schools, I cover that. I teach workshops, as you've mentioned, where I teach adults um, about craft, historic and prehistoric, mainly amber and some textile skills, making coil baskets, twining, some spraying. And then also with my colleague Kate, we run Historics, HYSTORICS, because that's us,
Yeah.
where we do prehistoric living history up until kind of the 10th century is the latest that we'll do.
Okay. So where
If the
did
if the computer falls off, that's the cat.
absolutely fine. So where did your career start off with all these different things that you do?
I mean, I started being interested in prehistory as a child growing up in New Zealand. Prehistory for us is less than 200 years ago. So the Neolithic is less than 200 years ago in New
That
Zealand.
is that is a really bizarre concept being from the UK.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a different perspective on the use of stone tools and the skills and prehistoric lifeways from doing that. And
Yeah.
I grew up running around museums with my grandparents, going up Pa, learning Māoritanga, and I studied archaeology at university. And then left New Zealand and started traveling the world. And I ended up with 5 years in the Maya world,
Okay.
working on an archaeological project there with the local community, and also incorporating forest gardening.
Yeah.
And our focus, although we did do some work on some of the monuments, the main focus was daily life. And again, it is another Stone Age technology. It's the Maya don't have metal, but they have writing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I came to well, via the States, did some work in the States, and then came to Britain and worked at Molas for a while, doing excavation, London's first community archaeologist, getting the word out to the public. So my interest has always been communication and how people have communicated in the past, but also how we communicate about the past
Yeah.
to people. So yeah, London's first community archaeologist. I wanted to do more in public engagement, more educational side of things. Told I had to get a teaching degree, so I did.
You're a person that does stuff.
Yeah. Well, when I said I wanted to be an archaeologist in high school, my
Yeah.
careers advisor turned around and said, well, you can't. You're a girl.
Oh,
Yep. So I did the only
wow.
sensible thing. I went and found someone that could give me good advice and
Yeah.
completely ignored what she said.
I think that was for the best.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so for me, it's getting that information out, because archaeological texts are not necessarily the easiest thing for people to read. Accessing some of the material can be difficult. It can be such a distant concept. So I want people to understand that, ancient peoples are like us, and they might not have a computer, but they still have skills that we stand on their shoulders. There's
Yeah.
nothing we have that we wouldn't have because of what people did in the past.
Yeah.
So I want to engender respect for ancient peoples in everything that I do.
Yeah, because I know so as I say, we're probably repeating ourselves a little bit, but I know you mentioned to me before about the sort of way that you have to approach teaching about the Maya in school.
Yeah.
And you made some really interesting points about that. So are you happy to go into that again?
I'm very happy to go into that again. So anybody that's watching will see I'm a pale. I mean, as pale as you get, the light is reflecting off my skin. I'm so pale. Sunburnt nose from Botsa the other day, tiny
Yeah.
little redhead. And I've got some really good Maya friends, some people I really respect. I do not look like an ancient Maya. And so when I go in and teach the Maya in schools, I go in and say, well, I'm an archaeologist, I work in the Maya world. And I will even talk to children about why I don't dress up. And that comes from my anthropological background and not wanting to be perceived as doing cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
And it's really important for us to respect ancient peoples, whether they were living in another part of the world, whether they're living here. And so I don't dress up and say, hey, I'm a Maya person, and pretend to be a Maya person. I go in and as an archaeologist, and I've worked in the Maya world. I still have contacts with the Maya world. I still go out and work in the Maya world.
Yeah.
And so I might have a dress up activity for children to experience what it's like for the Maya, but nobody's saying we're going to be Maya.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
It's a fine line.
How do the schools react to do they expect you to dress up, I suppose is the best way.
Sometimes. So I was in a school recently and I was prepping, and the head teacher said to me, oh, what are you going to wear? And I was like, I'm going to wear what I'm wearing at the time. Not my Gap sweatshirt, something a bit more respectable. Sometimes I do wear a wee peel, but with jeans. And I said, no, I'm presenting as an archaeologist, and um, I'm not going to dress up and pretend to be Maya for all the reasons I've just mentioned, but for ethical reasons.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, can you share that with the pupils? So although other providers might go in and dress up and pretend to be Maya, she actually appreciated what I was saying and said,
Mm.
look, we're a rights respecting school. Um, can you help the pupils understand why, cultural appropriation isn't a good thing? And,
Mm.
I really do not look Maya. I'm about the same height, but that's where it starts.
Yeah.
Um, and I respect the people that I've worked with too much. They're so amazing and knowledgeable. Sitting in in a meeting with some guys, and these guys left school at 14. So when I say we're sitting in a meeting, we're speaking in English.
Mm.
They switch to Spanish. I can follow most of that. They then
Yeah.
switch to Mayan, and then back to English. um their skills, their abilities. And we were talking about building houses and the different plants that they were using in the Maya world to build houses.
Yeah.
And so one of these chaps who's in his 80s built a Maya house that they had to pull down after 50 years with a bulldozer. It was so well built and
Wow.
maintained.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's impressive.
it's really impressive.
Mm.
This is using the stick from the jungle. The thatch is palm. You go and replace the thatch. So actually I'm in a thatch cottage right now. You can see my beams.
Yeah.
um if I may, this has been here 400 years. If I can maintain, if I keep maintaining the thatch, it could be here for another 400.
Mm.
um they have similar things, although their termites, although tasty, are a lot more aggressive.
So you said you're obviously friends with some of these
Yeah.
Maya as well. So I guess a sort of two-part question really is, one is, how do they react or feel about you teaching their culture sort of on their behalf? And likewise, from the archaeological perspective, when you were over there and you were digging things up, how did they react to a white person coming over and excavating sort of their heritage, their ancestors?
So, I mean, I work on a site called El Pilar, which is half in Belize and half in Guatemala. And we were working on the Belize side mostly.
Mm.
But, we had permission until we saw the yellow stripe on the jungle floor. We could go into Guatemala within our reserve. So when what for the local community, because when I first started working there, they had a college but not a university. So when people were coming in to do the work, and we were
Mm.
hiring local people as well, um, it they saw it as a job opportunity,
Okay.
um, because the funding isn't there. Belize is a small country. It's 170 miles long by 80 miles wide. Um, so to some degree, they could see the economic benefit. And as long as you treat them respectfully and listen, so we would have a fiesta every year where they would bring their living culture rather than the culture of the ancients, which there
Yeah.
are differences. Um, and also, like any culture, they're mixed. So Belize in particular has a Maya population, a Garifuna population, who are the descendants of the slaves that were brought over,
Mm.
and a white population, but it's very, very mixed. Um, so I was dating a Belizean, and he turns to me and says, "My mother is a black woman." It's like we're sitting next to each other, and he looks like your water bottle next to me. It's like, yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm just
Yeah.
melanin deficient. But no, as long as you were respectful and took
Yeah.
them on board, and of course, as our our respect for other cultures has changed over time. And I was lucky; I worked in a project that always respected the locals. So Annabelle Ford, the director, has brought forest gardeners from Belize into California to give lectures. So what they were astounded to a degree is that we saw the value in them teaching white people,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is a different, so we were learning from them. It's a two-way street. And as long as you're clear of that, but the financial input for a small country was quite a bonus, and particularly when you're hiring from the local village. So it's about
Yeah.
getting the local people on board and creating long-term job opportunities. So doing training for tour guiding, um, helping some of the craftspeople with what the market could be. So what do the tourists want to buy? So you've got to work a two-way street for there.
Mm. Yeah.
And also, I mean, when I first went to Belize, the park that we created, so I cut the boundaries for the park, was in the middle of the jungle. Now it's not. It's a pocket handkerchief part of the Jaguar corridor through Central America. And the people of my age that I was working with back then, they can see the change, they can see the value in what we did. And I have to say, I'm really proud to have been part of something that has created a national park, a binational park,
Yeah.
and preserved so much of the jungle for the future of Belize.
So what was it, sorry, that you were excavating at the time?
So the first year I was there, mostly we were excavating in the main plaza, so some temples in the main plaza while we were getting the reserve established.
Yeah.
But they sent me and my colleague out um, to cut the boundaries of the reserve. So we were doing survey as we went, so plotting new things as we went. Um, the next time I went back, we were working on a small household group. And then after that, they just started throwing me out into the jungle and saying, go find things.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And now, obviously, technology's moved on. So we have LiDAR, so light image aerial detection radar, or detection aerial radar, which the planes fly over and they take laser readings off the floor of the jungle, and then using computer technology you can strip off the jungle to see what the landscape looks like without damaging a single tree.
Nice.
And so we've been able to
Yeah.
find so much more that when you're walking through the jungle you might miss the first time.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
when I went out last year, we were doing some ground proofing of what we thought was there from the LiDAR.
So you still work out there at the moment?
Yeah, when I can.
Yeah. When you're not teaching?
When I'm not teaching, when I'm not moving house.
Yeah. So yeah, back to that other sort of part of that question then was how are they aware that you're teaching their culture over here, and how
But
do they
they
feel about it?
are, and actually you get surprised, like English people are learning about us. They're actually quite pleased that people are learning about their culture and that I can talk about living Maya, and that some of the traditions, they're not identical because things change, but some of the traditions come through. So yeah, the Maya people that I know are actually really pleased that I'm teaching other people, that they're aware, the whole global community. We've taken people from a tiny village, put them on a plane for the first time, and had them speak at an international consortium.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, things that they only saw on TV, they've experienced,
Yeah.
which is amazing connections, because, you know, we're all people. So yeah, they're quite pleased, and give me ideas and
Yeah.
help.
No, it's good. So do you take anything away from the way you approach teaching the Maya?
Mm.
Is there anything that you've taken from that to the way that you teach other periods or culture? So say Roman, Viking.
Yeah, it's the respect that we shouldn't parody or treat any ancient people any different than we would treat people today.
Yeah.
Particularly, you know, Vikings don't get a bad, you know, war, but apart from war and raiding, but they don't get the bad misrepresentation that
People seem
perhaps
keen on that too.
children love a bit of gore, but they
Yeah.
don't get the negative representation that early hominids get,
Mm.
or that even Neolithic people get, or, you know, Roman representation of what the Iron Age was like in Britain.
Yeah.
So I definitely take that respect thing on. I think I said earlier, we stand on the shoulders of those that came before us. So you
Yeah.
get children going, yeah, but they didn't have technology. And my answer to that is, they did. It just didn't have a battery. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it changes people's view. Just little things like that can change people's worldview and how they view the importance of technology if they can't make a piece of string.
Mm.
Because, you know, the world runs on string. So it's
Yeah.
making people aware of how we still, some things we do are things that people have done for thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. So definitely the respect, but I think that also comes from having, you know, grown up in the Pacific, having worked in the developing world, and with people. When you work in archaeology, when you work in the field outside of Britain, and when you work in commercial archaeology, so when you work in the developing world and when you work in commercial archaeology, you work with non-academics.
Mm.
And they all have something to give, because that's the amazing thing about archaeology, is that you pick up an object and you might have no clue what it is. And you might look at it and go, oh, it's a slotted spoon for making sauce.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, someone will pick
Mm.
up something and go, it's a bead. And I go, no, it's a spindle wheel. Because everybody's life experience is different.
Yeah. I can think of an example off the top of my head is the in fact I've got one here. The what we would call a whisk,
Yep,
top of my Christmas tree,
yep,
to Tvar. Um, they found something that looks like this on the Lendbreen Pass. Yeah, the Secrets of the Ice project.
yep. I know that.
They've got one of these, but the end is sharp. And I've read that it's thought it was a tent peg.
Okay.
But in Norway, they still use these. They still have them in their kitchens. And it's
Why
to
shouldn't it be
me,
a multi-tool?
it could have done both. But to me, it was just I saw the image and I was just, it's obviously a whisk.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But it's sharpened in. See, I look at it and go, it's a spindle.
Yeah.
Or it's also really, really handy if you put a hole through it for hanging different colored yarns from, or using as a coat hook.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's never one way to look at something.
Mm.
And different people's perspectives can give you different answers. The problem with the Lembrine Pass is these objects are found in isolation.
Yeah.
I mean, the amazing preservation of what they find out there, stuff that we wouldn't normally find because it's been frozen for 1,000 years or more, because they've got Neolithic and Mesolithic finds, wood finds. They've got an arrow that I think is a Mesolithic arrow out in the Lembrine Pass. But because it's frozen, it's lasted for a very long time. And normally we wouldn't find it.
Yeah. I think they found a whole tunic, like pretty much intact.
Yeah, that's Viking ages.
Yeah.
Viking period, the tunic.
Yeah.
Quite patched, and it's quite a difficult tunic with a large number of different stitches on it. Yeah, it's something I'm interested in making eventually, but I've got a lot of other things ahead in the list.
I think we all have those lists. They get longer, not shorter.
They do get longer, not shorter.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's part of this move, is I now going to have an indoor workshop. I've got a garage. I've got more spaces to make.
Yeah.
So.
Right, I've lost my train of thought. Where did we get to? Oh, we were talking about the culture and how you represent them. Yes, because it is an interesting point though, because I don't think I've ever heard anyone else approach it that way. Do you know what I mean? Like, we all look at the archaeology and the clothing and the tools and we use them, but I don't think anyone really thinks about the people as much. Maybe I'm wrong to say that. I don't know.
I think it's hard. See, it is hard unless you've had an experience like growing up. It's almost in living memory. The Neolithic, when I was growing up, was almost in living memory, and we had some very good texts, because when the Europeans went over, they recorded what they saw a bit better than the Romans did. I'm not going to say they weren't through tinted glasses, because there was definitely a tint on those glasses, but there are some very good ethnographic reports from Polynesia and New Zealand in particular from that time. And because Māoritanga is still so strong and the tribes are still there, some of the practices are continued with minimal disturbance. I'm not going to say there's not disturbance, but not the degree of disturbance that's happened, say, between the Spanish arrival in the Maya world.
Yeah.
Maori did very well at being very strong in keeping their cultural identity. But it's also 200, 300 years later, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was part of our study as our degree in New Zealand, and I didn't do my archaeology in Britain, so I'm not sure how, but I've not necessarily had these discussions with archaeologists in Britain, because when you're working on an archaeological site, it is about the objects. Although I'm going to go back on that a little bit, because I worked on a project before I left the Museum of London.
Yeah.
On the Wellcome Trust project. So I was writing about the graves that were excavated by Molas within London. There were certain parameters. Anglo-Saxon graves got in. But there were minimum sizes for the graveyards. And when I finished that project, and I had long conversations with Gus Milne from UCL at the time, because he was my project manager. And we were talking about the people, and particularly there's a really interesting burial at the end of the Fleet, which is an Anglo-Saxon burial, where it would have been an island at the time. And the people who are buried there are missing certain body parts. Oh. So it was obviously a very violent death.
Yeah.
And where they're missing body parts, they're not in a known church graveyard. There's, I think, 9 bodies. It's a long time since I wrote this. and their limbs have been replaced with stones.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's the stories of those people, because I was writing about burial practices, and as an archaeologist, you're usually writing about people being alive, not people being dead.
Mm.
And so we had long conversations about that. But yeah, as archaeologists, we want to write about people being alive. So I think you have to consider them as individuals, as, you know, having emotions and families and connections.
Definitely food for thought.
Yeah.
As I say, I
And I
mean,
think,
maybe it's just me. Maybe I've never considered the people when
mm,
I've looked at recreating food and things like that. I don't know, or whether it's, but I've never heard anyone discuss it before this.
no, it's a different thing to discuss, I think. Um, and also I think when we're doing our living history, you are
Mm.
representing living people. So
Yeah.
that makes a difference. And there's a very limited number of um, trained archaeologists that move into living history,
Mm.
or reenactment. So that makes a little bit of a difference as well. Because when we're talking to the public, then you want them to understand that this is your life. You know, we're not the dirty bit mace bearing or club bearing people of the Flintstones.
Yeah.
Yeah. um I mean, it's a different kind of it, and the education, it's a different kind of education, living history, a gentler kind of educating the public.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, with the living history, you, I think you get closer to the person, because you're talking about the skills and the aches and the pains and the trials and the tribulations that people would have had.
Yeah, he's kind of that where do you draw the line as well, isn't it? Like you say about how you have to draw a line when you do the Maya stuff.
Mm.
And it's whether I guess you count it as your heritage or if you're representing someone else's heritage.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously there is Viking and Anglo-Saxon here. I know that. So my mum's family's from Ireland. It's her surname was Boland, so you know that's like the Smith of the Irish. And my dad was originally from Sunderland, so
Hmm.
which was an area that was invaded by Vikings. You've got the Anglo-Saxon link there. Um, so I'm happy to portray that wearing my, you know, me, but also I have to do it in a way that makes me think that I am not disrespecting the people who came
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, that's and that's part of it, is to I want people to understand the complexity of life in the past, and that
Hmm.
people are people. You know, talk about Neanderthals; they're not that different from us. So
Hmm.
um, they just
Yeah.
didn't have iPhones.
We just haven't found one yet. That's
Ah, that's it. See, and I also think if someone from the past came forward into our time,
Hmm.
physically put them in modern clothes, they could be anyone walking down the street. They would probably adapt a lot faster to the technology we have and survive a lot better than us being transported back into their time, because we've lost all those skills.
Yeah, there's a lot more to learn. Yeah.
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 You know, ignore language issues. Ignore all.
Actually, I was reading an article earlier, which seems kind of relevant, was about a new study on Etsy.
Yeah.
Um, um, And the main takeaway I got from it is I never really considered why humans go from being dark-skinned to light-skinned. It's not something I've ever really thought about. But apparently it was to do with the diet. Once we start eating a more vegetarian diet, our skin got lighter.
Well, partly, but it's also partly to do with moving into the northern zones. So as you move up into Northern Europe, you have less light available. And so therefore your body needs to absorb vitamin D, which comes from the sun.
Yeah.
Dark skin actually blocks the vitamin D. So partly to do with diet, but partly also to do with the absorption um of essential nutrients for us to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even Neanderthals were eating a large amount of vegetable matter. You've got the use wear on their teeth showing that they're eating quite a lot of vegetable matter. Foraging does tend to be more successful. The success rate on foraging tends to be higher than the success rate on hunting. And even hunter-gatherer societies today rely more on the gathering than they do on the hunting.
Yeah. I mean, from what I gather, it's quite difficult, the whole hunting thing.
Yeah,
When you're not
it's not
using
a
modern
guarantee.
guns. Yeah.
Not a guarantee, and it's quite dangerous.
Yeah.
Whereas, picking blackberries, you can avoid the thorns. But, picking
Yeah.
blackberries, getting a thorn in your arm goes back to the need for cleanliness and understanding of medicine. Because if you're not clean, that's going to fester, send a blood infection. It's a danger to life. So, of course, these people knew about cleanliness. They knew about medicine plants, put some planting on, draw it out, fix yourself up. That immediately goes back to, let's not represent them as the cave person carrying a club.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're more knowledgeable than quite often they're given credit for. Yeah.
Yeah. There was in the Wiltshire Museum, which is just up the road from us. I I think I called him out on the podcast, the director, because they've got some images on the wall in the Stone Age area of all these naked people walking around. And I
Yep.
was like, so they were doing that in England, were they walking around butt naked in the middle of winter? Yeah.
No, actually, I was just at Nebworth House today, and they had some woolly mammoths, and they had some Neanderthals wearing loincloths. And yeah, the same thing. That's all they were wearing, and bit chilly.
Yeah. I can't
But
remember what Wiltshire Museum said. I think that they were old images that I can't remember why they were done. And I guess it's funding and getting them replaced and
then also, do they become museum pieces in themselves?
yeah.
In Because we need to document our change of language. So if you go back to what used to be the standard archaeology 101, was Fagin's, what was it? It started off with the development of mankind, or something like that. So I had a copy from when my sisters did Anthropology 101 in the 70s. And
Yeah.
then when I went to university in the 90s, I changed the title to human rather than mankind. And, it's those small shifts in language that need to happen. I see signs and they say man, and I cringe, because what happened to the woman and children? We don't use man to represent all of humankind anymore.
Yeah.
And those small changes in language are actually really essential in how we view people of the past. The importance, particularly, look at the Viking period, the importance of textile production. not something that was done by a woman, but archaeologists in the 19th century used to throw away textiles because they weren't valued. Because in our modern time, where you've got fast fashion, textile doesn't have value. But, you know, make a Viking sail, one person, take them 4 years.
Yeah.
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 So those small
Incredible.
tweaks in language actually make big differences in the long run.
Mm.
And that's something I'm very careful about when I'm talking to children, but to the public as well, that we're using appropriate language so that we are talking about humans rather than men. It's like, well, what happens to the women and children? They existed, but previous scholars were white men,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's all they were showing. So that, I mean, that's part of it as well. You know, as a woman in a field that was male dominated when I was coming up and studying,
Mm.
those considerations, and that I'm really pleased that has changed quite a lot.
I mean, that kind of goes full circle, doesn't it? Back to when you were saying about your careers guidance, saying that you couldn't do it.
Yep. Yep.
Out of interest, was that a male or a female?
It was a female.
Hmm.
Nearing
Yeah.
retirement even at the time, but it was a
Yeah.
female. I was
Yeah.
told I could be a nursery teacher.
Mm. Well, at least you found someone that was more suitable, shall we say?
Yeah, my father was against me being an archaeologist till I told him what the careers advisor had told me.
Oh, and then he got behind you, did he? Oh, well, that's a positive thing.
And
That's
his
good.
reason wasn't because I was female. His reason was that archaeologists didn't earn a lot of money.
Okay.
And until
Yeah.
someone told his little girl that she couldn't do what she wanted to do, that wasn't him.
That's
You know,
nice. Yeah.
fair enough. You know, it's not the stock market, but I've done okay.
Mm.
I'm never going to be a millionaire, but I'm doing okay.
Shall we move on to the questions that I ask everyone? Because
Okay,
speaking
let's
of
do the questions that
millionaires,
you ask everybody.
just thinking time's getting on. I don't want to keep you for too long. But I'm thinking, as you just mentioned, being a millionaire. So if you had an unlimited budget,
Yeah.
what would be your dream project?
My dream project would be to have a prehistory craft hub. Yeah, a bit like the living history museums, but was employing um, some of the amazing craftspeople that we have in this country full time, doing what they love, and not necessarily meaning, hey, you're going to go in the potting shed every day, because prehistoric life wasn't like that.
Mm.
But allowing them to move between different things,
So
and
sort
it
of
was in the river.
working site or a living site, really.
Yeah,
It's yeah, as
yeah,
close as we could get it to what it would have
yeah.
been like.
Maybe
Yeah.
with, you know, the hot shower and a few home comforts at the end of the day. I mean, I
Yeah.
like doing the living thing. I've got a week coming up in Holland where we're living um in a camp that's based on the Ertebal, so late Neolithic. But yeah, I do at the end of my week like to come home and have a shower.
Let's face it, as you mentioned earlier about bringing someone from the past forwards, if they had the option to have a hot shower,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
no one's turning down a hot shower, right?
No, no one's turning down a hot shower. So yeah,
No.
I'd love to have that, and the woodlands and all the resources to really do a lot of full-on experimental archaeology
Hmm.
with
Okay.
stable funding.
We've got an unlimited budget, so.
Yeah.
All right. So the next question is, do you think you could survive on a Viking Age diet?
Oh yes. Oh yes, definitely.
Definitely. I'm sure you've probably done it, or to some extent through reenactment and things, you've eaten the food and
Yep, yep.
yeah.
And actually, as you know, I know it's a high day kind of food, but I had the rye bread when I was down at Butser, and I had the honey and walnut, all sourdough, so all ancient grains.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I've got some more purple carrots to plant for
Mine
Grace
got
too.
eaten this year. I've planted two lots of carrots and they either haven't germinated or something's eaten them before I found them. So I think they're being eaten.
Well, maybe you should do an inside pot.
Yes. It's just planting them out again is a problem, but that's another subject.
Yep.
um, so is there any food you'd miss on a Viking Age diet?
Chocolate,
Chocolate.
chocolate. Yeah, so I need a bit of Maya in there.
Yeah.
At the same time period,
Yes.
the Vikings did make it to the Americas, but not that far south.
Yes. No chocolate for us, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
All right. What's the weirdest thing in your kitchen?
Um, Probably for most people is the corn husks that I use to make tamales, which are a Maya food.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's not come up before?
No, it's
No.
how would you just so a tamale is a little bit like a Cornish pasty, but it's made with corn mush and steamed
Okay.
and wrapped in a corn husk.
Interesting.
They
Hmm.
can be sweet or savory.
Can they be both? Like your pasties used to have the filling at the bottom that was.
Never had one that's both.
Hmm.
Usually when I don't make them like this, but when we're out in Belize, usually they come with a chicken bone. So you have
Just
to
the
be
bone.
careful when you eat your tamales because the chicken isn't deboned.
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You don't just
Uh,
crunch down.
what's the worst food or drink that you've ever eaten?
I'm going to go with jelly deals.
That matches Andy's answer. So Andy from the ATC, that's his worst food.
Yeah. I mean, I eat eel, like smoked eel, steamed eel. It's the jelly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Reminds me of cat food.
it's not my favorite. It's okay. Um, it's more for me, it's more the bones, I think,
Yeah.
that put me off. I'm not so bothered about the jelly.
Just
Yeah.
pulling out all those tiny bones.
There's just so many bones in there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, we get big eels in New Zealand,
Yeah.
like big. So,
I think they're a bit harder to get hold of here now, aren't they, than they used to be, what with
yeah, I
them
think
being in
so.
decline. Um, I know last time we got some, I had to hunt them down. Not literally, but
Well,
um,
I mean, we would come home with mum didn't cook them. She made us take them back. We'd come home with the park from the park with a tin of eels. And mum would send us back.
I mean, they're quite hard to prepare if you get them fresh, aren't they? Don't you have to like
Yeah,
pull the skin off and
yeah. So mum would send us back. They had to go back in the river.
yeah.
My brothers, what can I say?
What's the most memorable meal you've ever had?
Um, Last summer in Denmark, a friend and I went to a tasting menu up in the north where we had, I think it was 12 courses of Danish fusion food.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no course was big, but it was amazing and possibly the most expensive meal I've ever had.
It's not the cheapest part of the world.
No. But we don't get to see each other very often, and it was definitely a good evening.
Was that must have been on the trip when we kept bumping into each other?
Yeah, that was on the trip where we kept bumping into each other, and it was just really hilarious.
Yeah.
There's Craig.
Yeah. I go through the museum and like looking at this ship, and there's Vanessa.
Yeah, outside the museum, the railway.
Yes, when we were on the way to the fairground with Ocean, I think that day in Copenhagen. We went
and
to
I was heading to the National Museum of Copenhagen.
Yes.
Just, put my friend on the plane. She went off to the plane, and I'm like, I didn't book mine till late in the afternoon because I'm going to the museum. She swore at me. But
yeah,
it's a museum full of amber.
Yeah, we went there as well. And we took Ocean to, I think it's called Tivoli. It's like the world's oldest fairground. Well, it might be second oldest. I think it was called Tivoli. Something like that. I'm sure people will know or can look it up if they're interested. We're not here to talk about fairgrounds.
No. And I went to see the Fun Albert and lots and lots and lots of the most amazing ancient amber.
Yeah, I did see the amber as well. Yeah. So we've got one more question. And it's, when you die, your relatives are preparing your grave goods.
Mm-hmm.
What food and drink are you taking to the feast in Valhalla?
Okay. So my grave goods is, I'm not sure which box it's in, but I have a Anglo-Saxon burial urn that I made. So I'm going in that, but I am taking seafood, lots and lots of seafood and tropical fruit, and some mead and some chocolate, definitely chocolate. Whether it's milk or solid, I don't know, all of it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Not fast.
No, I am fast. It's got to be good. But I do, chocolate milk, solid chocolate, but good chocolate. Yeah.
Nice.
I'm a bit like some people get fussy about their coffee. That's me and chocolate.
That's absolutely fine. You got to take what you like.
Yeah. Or you leave it. If it's not up to par, you leave it.
Nice. Well, thank you for your time this evening.
You're welcome.
The second time we've had to record. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So yeah, thank you very much. Do you want to give yourself a little plug where people can find you online?
Okay. Yep. You can find me on all the usual social media. Twitter, Instagram, is I post most on Instagram, Facebook, and my website is www.pukub.uk.co. Sorry, I had to think about that. But PukuB is gonna find me on a Google search.
I'm sure there's only one PukuB.
There's probably only one PukuB, but there are a few Pukus out there.
Are there?
Yeah. Well, it's Maori for tummy. What can I say?
I love it. I didn't know what that meant before today.
No, it's just one of those things.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And thank you everybody for watching or listening. And I will see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed the show and want to hear more, remember to like and subscribe and give the show a rating. You can also help keep the show going by becoming a Patreon, where you'll get early access to all episodes, or check out my range of merch on my store. Links are in the episode description. Thanks for watching.